Hello and welcome to another edition of Not Your Granny's Opera Podcast. In this week's episode, we're going to talk about some things that I love, and those are taking risks with modern productions, memes, and the marriage of Figaro. Alright, for the shout out this week, it actually goes to Aiden Lang, who is the general director of Seattle Opera. He made his announcement that he's actually going to be leaving Seattle at the end of this coming season to go be the director at Welsh National Opera, which happens to be a place that he started his career at. So I wanted to congratulate him and wish him good luck from here in New York. I really appreciated working for Aiden because he came at a really difficult time in Seattle Opera's history. And that's because, he was taking over for Spate Jenkins, who he is a legend, not only in Seattle, but throughout the opera world as a director, general director of a company. He was the director for Seattle Opera for close to 35 years or something like that. And he really helped to bring Seattle Opera to a much higher level of prominence in the United States. And especially they were known for their ring cycle. Okay. So Aiden had a pretty difficult job between, replacing a guy who's been there forever, and then the company, because of the economy in the United States, every company was struggling potentially. So he had to make some difficult decisions in terms of personnel, but he also had to make some bold and risky and difficult decisions when it came to casting and choosing repertoire, and doing productions that are non-standard, and trying to build a new base of audience members. And also, one of his main missions was to create an opera company that actually reflects Seattle. Not just, we're a company that's in Seattle that does what everybody else does, but it's a company that reflects the values of the Pacific Northwest and of Seattle. So, on top of their normal main stage shows, they also started doing chamber operas and really increased the amount of reach that they had through their community engagement programs and tours, which I was a part of as a principal singer. And he had this vision of trying to make opera accessible for everyone and not just, it's amazing as is. Why change things? He took some pretty big risks and did some productions that a lot of us during it either didn't like or didn't understand why they were doing it, but they ended up being a huge profit, not only monetarily, but also the amount of ticket sales over time. In his 5 years in Seattle, I think he increased the average ticket sales per year by like 20,000. It went up 125%, something like that. So he was doing a great job, but he got an offer I'm guessing he couldn't refuse. And from what I've read, he still has family in the UK. His mom is there, and she is, getting up there in years. And so it's really important for him and Linda, his wife, to head on back to the UK. And so I wish them well, and I'm grateful for working for them and how he helped open my eyes to some different avenues of how opera can be done in our modern society, and I used it in conjunction with my own ideas to help create how I feel about Opera Muse and all these other various projects, and how we can make opera a truly 21st century art form. So, bravo to you, sir, and best of luck in your last season in Seattle and the future. Now, for Koline's Corner, we are gonna talk about memes. Memes are, of course, a really fun way to communicate and to tell jokes. And, I would say, with the exception of my girlfriend and my family members, I would say the vast majority of my conversations with my friends are through memes, and then the conversations that come after that. Now, memes can be funny, they can be serious, they can be political, they can be inspirational. A meme is essentially a picture that has a different text or caption under it than what may actually be happening. You've all seen these things. I don't know why I feel like I need to define it, but just in case there's somebody who doesn't know what one is, there you go. Now, I picked a bunch of them that I saw online recently that I found pretty funny. Also, I have actually a secondary shout out to a friend who is a lot like me in terms of he's trying to find ways to connect with new audiences, and I'll talk more about him, and I'll also share one of the ones that he did. So, all right, so this first one is, of course, the Dos Equis guy. You know what I'm talking about? Okay, so it says, I don't always listen to opera, but when I do, I lied. I always do listen to I do always listen to opera. And that's honestly me in a nutshell. I mean, I work out to it. I obviously listen to it to prepare and, do it for entertainment. That's totally me. All right, let's get into some funny ones. Now, in Purcell's Dido and Aeneas, okay, this is a really famous Baroque opera, early opera. And in Dido, Aeneas is a Trojan warrior. He starts sailing in the Mediterranean, ends up in Africa, and he falls in love with Dido. He eventually has to leave, or chooses to leave, I should say, and she's distraught over it. And so she's going to kill herself over this, as they do in opera. So before, though, she kills herself, she sings one of the most famous Baroque opera arias, and it's called When I Am Laid in Earth. And she's talking to Belinda, her servant, and she starts out, she's saying, "Thy hand, Belinda, come here, give me your hand. Darkness shades me." And eventually she goes into saying, "When I'm laid in earth, let not my wounds create no trouble in your breast." So basically, don't let anything that I'm doing trouble you. But also, she says, remember me, which I think for a lot of people who go through, when you're getting towards the end of your life, especially when, it's not like a tragic accident when you're young, you're quote unquote expecting to die, I guess. One of the things that I think a lot of people want is to be remembered. So it's a really touching moment, really relatable moment. However, this meme features one of my favorite things on the internet, and that is Angry Cat. And so it says, now remember how this started out. It says, "Thy hand, Belinda, darkness shades me," and he's just like, good. That's so good. This is a really true one. It's of two singers, arguably probably a tenor and a soprano, right? And it says, "Promise me we'll be together forever." And the soprano says, "Are you kidding me? This is a tragic opera. We'll be lucky if one of us makes it out alive." Which is really true. And usually it's the soprano that dies, or the main woman, in the case of Carmen. Carmen's usually played by a mezzo. Now, remember in the very first episode, we talked about suicide and how people like to jump off things as a way to do it. Well, this is one of them that I actually referenced. This is from Tosca. And this is her jumping off the parapet at the end of the show. And so it's like, Tosca, out, boom. So she gone. She is gone. This one is really cool, actually. It's a two-parter. Now, this first part says, "It takes a real man to be a mezzo." Now, you look at that, and you're like, that's a kind of quasi Johnny Depp looking person, but definitely a guy. You would be wrong, though, because that is world famous mezzo soprano Cecilia Bartoli. I absolutely adore Cecilia. She has such a unique timbre, and you can see her there. And when you compare the two, you'll see that, yeah, it's her. But as a mezzo, she does pants rolls and stuff like that. But she's an incredible artist, singing actress. She's also known for her facial expressions, which, if you want to see some funny singer facial expressions, just listen to any of her stuff that has a lot of coloratura, like Baroque stuff, Rossini. It's pretty epic. not only in terms of the facial expression, but she is an incredible artist. I mean, she's really, really great. Now, this last one, I mentioned that there's going to be another shout out. This goes out to my friend Rob McPherson. He, of course, is the proprietor, or purveyor, I should say, of the Drunken Tenor. And he also is one of the moderators on a really famous singer forum on Facebook. And so he started doing, oh geez, maybe a year ago or so, maybe it was longer, I don't know. And he started doing this thing called Opera Hashtag Wars. And so what he'll do is he'll post a hashtag and he'll say like, ruin an opera by adding a word, you know, adding or changing a word. So like there was one that I got one of the, because what he'll then do with all that information is he'll pick like 2 or 3 that are really, really funny, and he'll Photoshop in and like put it as like the poster for the show. And it's really, really creative. He's getting to be a master at this stuff and cranking it out quickly. One of the ones that I won was The Last 5 Beers, you know, The Last 5 Years musical. So that was one of those words, change a word and ruin a show. This one I love because it's a Mozart opera, of course. This is from Così fan tutte. This is Fiordiligi's aria. She sings, and oh my goodness, this is one of my favorite soprano arias that Mozart wrote. And it's called Come Scoglio, which means like a rock. And basically in this moment, Ferrando and Guglielmo are trying to get Fiordiligi and Dorabella to go off with them and do amorous things, which would then be them cheating on their boyfriends, which actually Ferrando and Guglielmo are in disguise. So it's a really convoluted story, but basically they're trying, through a bet with Don Alfonso, they're trying to see if the girls will cheat. So they go in disguise, and so they're like trying to get them to go with them, right? So she sings after they try for a little bit, you know, Fiordiligi's like, no, we are going to be like a rock, and we are not movable. We are not going to give in to you. So she sings this amazing aria called Come Scoglio. And so Rob did this with it. And so he photoshops in The Rock singing Come Scoglio. Brum, brum. It's so good. I love it. It's one of my favorite ones that he did. So good. So mini shout out to Rob. I will link his Instagram and website and all that stuff. He does actually a program called The Drunken Tenor, which I've seen him do, and it's the basic premise is this is what happens when a tenor goes to a gig drunk and he tries to not screw it up too badly. And so it's him, a pianist and a soprano, and he's rewritten some stuff really creatively. And he's much like me, where he likes that whole writing aspect and stand up and all that. And he's super talented. And I hope that if he's ever doing his show in your area, you really need to go see it. It's hysterical. The final section of this, we're going to talk about The Marriage of Figaro. Figaro is arguably the best opera ever written. I know a lot of people will fight me on that, but I would say you can't say it's not at least a top 5, I would say. And so we'll go into some facts about it, the basic premise and all that. Mozart, of course, at this point is only 30 years old. So, I mean, I already feel like I haven't done anything with my life with how much this guy's composed. And he's 5 years younger than me. But he is only 30, and this of course is the beginning of a trilogy of really famous operas that he would write with Lorenzo da Ponte, who's a librettist. He of course would later write Don Giovanni and Così fan tutte. And so this was a really interesting show because Da Ponte and Mozart wanted to do something different stylistically. Now, prior to this, you had this idea of opera buffa and opera seria. Now, buffa meaning comic, and seria, you guessed it, meaning serious. And traditionally, the the buffo characters would just be these idiots, you know, that don't really, they're really one-dimensional people. But he wanted to go and do something more with these characters. Another fun fact about The Marriage of Figaro is a lot of the music is still done outside of the opera when it's done in its completion. Like, for example, the overture, you've probably heard it at some point in your life, either on TV, you know, having a short little quote of it, or in a movie. One of the more famous or recognizable places where the music comes in is in Shawshank Redemption, which is where you have the Countess and Susanna's duet Sullaria comes on through the main PA system. So there's some kind of background on the work itself, right? Now let's go into the characters. Who are the main characters in this show? The main characters are four of them. There is Figaro, of course, Susanna, his betrothed, and they eventually do get married within the show. And then you have Countess Almaviva and Count Almaviva. There really isn't any extra stuff that you need to know, other than Figaro did help in the first book, did help the Count get with the Countess. Of course, Figaro is, you all know the song, Figaro, 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 Figaro. Yeah, so that's from the Barber of Seville. So that happens prior to. So he goes from being kind of the everyman, the jack of all trades, master of none in the town, doing everything, to just being the Count's servant because he did this great thing for Lindoro, or Count, who became Count Almaviva. I mean, he was already royalty, but he goes by Lindoro in the show. Okay, now Lindoro falls in love with Rosina. They eventually get married. So the other thing with them getting married is that during the time, they had this thing called the right of lordship. Now, the right of lordship was the law that a nobleman could sleep with the wife of a peasant in a peasant wedding, like on the night of their wedding before the husband. Okay? And how this plays in is that he gets rid of it. And I don't know the exact timeline of things, but I always use the 7-year itch analogy, where basically he gets married, he gets rid of it, because he's like, no, I love Rosina, right? Countess Almaviva, I love her, so I'm not going to go sleep with people. Like, duh. Okay, so, but then, as time goes on, 7 years presumably, he has buyer's remorse when it comes to this whole getting rid of it thing, because he's now sees Susanna, she's this hot young thing, and he's always in contact with her because of the Countess. He starts getting a little crush, and he wants to sleep with her. Okay, so there's that whole dynamic, and so the whole point of the show, it's actually not about Figaro's marriage per se. It's about trying to get the Count. And so then Figaro and Susanna and the Countess devise this plan to catch the Count later in the show. Eventually they do catch him in the act through some switching of, through some disguises and stuff like that. He gets caught. He eventually apologizes to the Countess, and she forgives him. And it's a really remarkable moment, because throughout the whole show, he's been a huge jerk to everybody. Of course, the whole infidelity thing is not good. And she still forgives him. In today's society, sometimes that moment, even though it's beautiful music and really moving, some audiences are like, yeah, I don't know if that would happen in today's society. That's a little optimistic. You know, but whatever. It's still a great moment. Now, some other fun characters in the show are Carabino, who is a page boy. It's a mezzo panther, also a woman playing a dude, and he's a 15-year-old boy, and as you might guess, full of hormones and full of testosterone, and he's also in love with the Countess. Now, the Countess doesn't necessarily have the same feelings for him in this show, but he also is constantly getting in the Count's way, so it's really funny and fun to watch how the Count reacts with Carabino throughout the show. Then, of course, there's Bartolo, who is in The Barber of Seville, which, of course, is the first book. He is actually Countess Almaviva, so Rosina. Rosina was his ward in the first show. So he's an older guy. He's a doctor, and he has this woman, Marcellina, who they're in a relationship together, and they make this plan because Figaro owes Marcellina money, and she wants to get it, and so he's going to help her with it. We come to find out later that actually Figaro is the son of Bartolo and Marcellina, which leaves the Count confounded and beyond disbelief in that moment. That sextet is one of my favorite moments in the show. It's hysterical. The other main character is Basilio, who is the Count's. He's a count. He's not as high as Count Almaviva, so he's one of his underlings, I guess you would say, but he is the music teacher, and he's the mouthpiece, the music teacher for Susanna, and he's the mouthpiece that basically keeps like, hey, you should check out the Count, he really likes you, you should be with him, not with Figaro. Figaro's an idiot, right? He's poor, like, you don't want to be with that. You should be with Count Almaviva. He's got a thing for you. Your life's set. You should go for it. That kind of rationale and all that. It's such a great show. You should definitely check it out. So yeah, that's the podcast for this week. Like I mentioned, I'm going to post stuff about Rob McPherson's Drunken Tenor things. I'll also post an article about Aiden's departure from Seattle if you want to read that. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.